All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode number 7 of the Virtual Village. I am Donald Ruff, the Director of College and Post-Secondary Initiatives for the Eagle Academy Foundation, and I would like to give you a warm welcome to Hello Summer. Today's episode is really going to focus on what to do as a parent to make sure that our students are meaningfully engaged this summer. And I have two very special guests with me today, Kimberly Hall from the Department of Education, as well as Marc Fernandez from Youth Inc. So I'll allow them to introduce themselves before we dive into our episode today. Kim?
Good evening. Good, thank you, Donald, so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is, Kimberly Hall, and I am a college and career planning manager within the Office of Post-Secondary Readiness at the New York City Department of Education. I am also the parent of two young ones. I have a daughter who's starting her 3rd year in college, and I have a son who's 11 and in 6th grade at Eagle Harlem currently.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Donald, for having me. My name is Marc Fernandez. I am the Director of Impact Evaluation at Youth Inc. here in New York City, and I am also a youth development consultant. I also am a parent. I have a 13-year-old boy who is going into 8th grade. He's already finished with his 7th grade year. And I have a 5th grader. I have an 11-year-old boy who is currently in the Department of Education, and he goes to school. We live in Queens, and he will be finishing up the end of next week.
All right, excellent, excellent. So I'm a parent as well. I actually have a rising 13-year-old son who will be 13 this coming August, and my daughter is actually just turned 17 yesterday. So I have that middle school and high school combination, but that's why this conversation is so important. First, professionally, what it is that we do, and it's such a pleasure to have two people who've dedicated their career to youth development and service. Always a pleasure. And but basically also getting our parent perspective. I know I've been receiving a lot of emails, text messages in terms of what can we do with our kids this summer. And right now it's June 16th, right? And there's a lot happening in the world when we're talking about the twin pandemics of COVID-19, as well as the civil unrest connected to the treatment of Black people in this country, right? And the whole Black Lives Matters movement. In 2 weeks, most young people will finally disengage from their virtual learning. So no summer youth employment. A lot of programs are very limited for the summer. We're still not even in phase 2 in New York City. What can we do as parents? Kim, jump in.
Listen, I know that as the school year closes down, I know that my son is in his last week of actual instruction. It's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Happy to not be teaching math anymore, which was not my strong point, but really concerned about how to keep him engaged and focused and active during the summer.
Yeah, I think I can definitely feel, Kim, your that tension between kind of the excitement of school ending, because it takes a lot of pressure off of both the children and us as parents in terms of having to be teachers at home. I also navigate it. My son has an IEP, and so really trying to provide special education services as a special ed teacher is almost impossible. That's not my skill set. And so it's actually been really challenging at home. So I'm excited about school ending, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the lack of options for our children, especially in an in-person setting. And so it's overwhelming, and I can just imagine that is the same for probably every parent in New York City that doesn't have the freedom and the privilege to leave the city. We don't have the opportunity to leave the city and go to a country home or travel. So we're bound to our neighborhood.
Right. So Marc, you were probably one of the first people I spoke to, I should say, in terms of this crisis that we were seeing during the summer in terms of the lack of meaningful engagement for young people across the city. What are some of the things that families should be thinking about in terms of engagement, given the
Well,
limited options?
well, I think to start, I think it's important to really understand the landscape, right? So, um, we're as you mentioned earlier, we're in a really different time, and the landscape is such where just last week the state put out guidance on what summer programming can look like, and the guidance is quite robust. It really is a document that highlights the barriers that organizations have to be able to provide in-person programming, and lots of different stipulations to be able to provide engagement in a real time, space-based way. And so what we're seeing right now, because the guidance only came out last week, what we're seeing is organizations really trying to weigh right now what they're going to do. And like, for instance, I just got an email this morning from the summer camp that we had planned on putting our children in, our day camp for after school in our neighborhood. And they laid out very clearly that their normal 150 student summer camp that they usually do, they're not able to do. They just do not have the capacity to be able to provide 150 young people with care. And so they were asking us who is really interested in sending their children to summer camp so they could get a pulse on if they can even open or not, right? Because that they're still trying to figure out if they can open. And so you've got organizations that have historically provided resources over the summer that, one, have either lost their funding through the DYCD or other funding resources. And then there's the limitations from the state. And so what you're seeing organizations trying to figure out, one, if they're going to open, two, if they're going to do some hybrid of some level of in-person engagement and then primarily do virtual engagement, or if they're going to do all virtual engagement. And it's a really hard decision, and they're still figuring it out. So not to mention, they're trying to navigate their resources, right? So we've got organizations that have already decided that they're not running summer programming because of they don't have the staffing, they don't have the space, and they just don't have the resource generation coming in to provide what they need. And so they're now having to determine, do we charge or do we try to provide the programming that we've provided for families that have been just grant funded or public service funded, opportunities. And they're challenged by that because some are charging and some don't feel like they can charge the communities that they serve because those communities are lacking resources anyway. So I think that's kind of that's the landscape of folks trying to figure it out. Did you want to add anything, Kim, at all, or?
No, I think that you've covered it pretty much. Like, there's a lot of just unknown. Like, for example, my son's camp is also funded by DYCD, and they called camp back in I want to say April, right? And so we've known there would be no camp for him, and they've not been able to offer any kind of services at all at this point. So, and things are constantly changing, yes, and so that also keeps it like very hard to keep up with things.
Right. So
Yeah.
Kim,
Oh,
yeah, Kim, you mentioned
sorry.
something earlier in terms of really striking that balance between the academics, the fun for your children. What are some strategies that you would give to families in terms of helping to really strike that balance and keep their kids engaged and kind of preventing that summer melt?
So actually, that's a struggle in my household right now, and I think Marc, we were talking earlier, was saying the same thing. Like my son, like I said, is 11, and has normally been an athlete. He has played soccer, he's played baseball, and he's played basketball. He also played flag football, all in organized sports. I cannot get him to engage in any physical activity right now. I cannot get him to go outside. He won't go with me for a walk, for example, when I do my morning walks. And so academically, he is engaged and he is doing his schoolwork, and that is going well. But the keeping him active part, right? Keeping him moving. Like as a young boy, he was bouncing off the walls in the house, right? But he would go outside and burn some of that energy off. And that piece is not now able to happen. So that's been a struggle in my household. I know Marc mentioned.
So I think this is, it's interesting because yeah, I can completely relate to you, Kim, because my kids are the same right now, totally. And I think the reality is that most children are. So just to give some context, and I think it's really important that we back up a little bit. So I think back to my own childhood, and all of us are older and we're a different generation. And I think about the relationship between the formal and the informal, and the need for informal time for children.
Yes.
And we have done, I think, a disservice to children of today in that we are over scheduling our young people, and we're creating structures where young people are expected to be engaged, this idea of being engaged at all times. And I would really ask parents, and we're doing it as parents now, to really kind of take a step back, take a breath, and think about a few things that I think are really important to think about today versus just a regular summer day, right? Today is June 16th. Exactly 3 months ago, our young people in New York City were placed in homeschooling environment. So it has been 3 full months that parents and children have been quarantined or keeping shelter at home. We've got, as you mentioned earlier, there are two main things that are happening that are significant global kind of lifetime events, crises, right?
Yes.
We've got, as you mentioned, Donald, earlier, we've got a coronavirus that is devastating our communities, and especially devastating Black and Brown communities at a disproportionate rate. We also have a social movement and social unrest that is, again, disproportionately, specifically impacting Black young people.
Yes.
And this is happening simultaneously. And so, separate from the fact that young people who are social beings and who require being able to be in spaces where they can release, they can express, they can build relationships, all of that is being suppressed inside a home. Adding to that, other stressors that build up in the house,
Yes.
from parents and small quarters. We live in an apartment in Queens. There's 4 of us. We are on top of each other, and we are not behaving in the best ways that we could potentially behave because of the impact that all of these things are having on our lives. And so I think it's really important that parents sit back and really take in how that translates into our children's behavior. Kim, what you're sharing right now is very common, right? Young people are disengaging. They are emotionally, as well as adults. I'm disengaging. I am finding it much harder today to be social and want to be connecting to my peers as I was 3 months ago. I'm not exercising to the level that I would like to exercise because I'm not finding the motivation. So add that to being a child and being a young person going through puberty, going through their development, it's heightened to another level. And so I think it's really important that we take a pulse on where our children are and what it is that they actually need right now. And instead of just trying to fill their days with things, I think we need to figure out how do we start having conversations with them to get a better understanding from them of where they are socially and emotionally, and what they need in their lives for us as parents to be able to kind of meet them. And so I think that there are things that we can do. So I think talking, right? Really talking to our children and having those hard conversations, and not judging where their behavior is, because it's frustrating. And believe me, I'm like super frustrated, and we're like fighting, and but at the same time, my wife and I are really trying to we're trying to be patient and empathetic, and balance kind of our expectations for engagement with their need for quiet and for downtime, and to just decompress and be alone and sleep, and just have that informal need-based social engagement, for instance.
To do what's developmentally appropriate at that given age, right?
Correct.
And Marc, thank you so much for really painting that very, very clear picture. This is not business as usual. We are in a very, very unique situation, and I thank you for that, because I think as parents we've gotten into the habit of really overscheduling our kids, right? With the ultimate prize of them, achieving at a high level. So thank you for that, right? Because I think we all have to be mindful. And as a matter of fact, the foundation team is putting together some really great resources. And Marc and Kim, thank you for sending the resources that you guys sent, that we'll be sharing out with all of the audience members on how to engage your children in some of these courageous conversations about what's happening right now. A big part of their relationships and their self-identity is being part of their peer group. And they've been robbed of that for the past 3 months. So there's a balance that we have to strike between empathy and accountability with our kids. But we have to take the time to listen. So Kim, I want to pivot to you, right? When you spoke about your son being incredibly active, I was thinking a lot of things were running through my head, because my son is also active, and I started thinking about the socially distancing sports, right? Is there some type of golf program? Is rowing available? You have to think outside the box now, right?
Sure.
So Kim, ultimately, it's never too early to begin the preparation for college for young people, right? So when we talk about engaging in conversations and things of that nature, what are some of the things that families can do to start the early process?
And so one of the things that I think is important, and Mike and I, my son's name is Michael, we actually went on a virtual college tour back in April. And he decided to choose UCLA because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went there, and he is in basketball mode right now, right? And so giving him the space to kind of take that step back that he's needed to, and not make it a back and forth kind of bone of contention. But when I asked him to do activities like virtual college tours, right? That's not a negotiable. We need to have this conversation. Let's explore together, right? Me and you sit down together on this computer and look at this and see what you think about it. I think that's super key, right? So virtual college tours are important. Looking at websites like My Next Move, for example, mynextmove.org, and thinking about what your future could look like. It's never too early to start taking interest inventories, looking at different careers. And I'm happy to say that many of these activities are coming through from his teachers, from his assignments at school, which has been helpful, right? So that's also helped to open that door and allowed us to have this conversation. I think that things like Next Stop College are also super important, which is a new website that CUNY has been developing. And then I think that one of the things that I also have been enjoying, so part of what he's been doing for school has been Khan Academy with his math teacher. And I've learned that they actually have broadened their offerings and include things like careers and financial literacy and financial planning. And so looking at those types of activities within websites we use, normally just for academics, have been super helpful to help kind of have a conversation. So what are you thinking about for your future? What does that look like for you? You're muted, Donald.
And Marc, just jumping back to you. We know our children are going through a lot right now. Are there any tools, or like how would a family begin to put their finger on the pulse of what a child is going through, going beyond a simple conversation? Are there any tools, any resources that come to mind that could really help families navigate that very challenging space?
Well, I mean, I think that the first thing that comes to my mind is this is really about kind of getting familiar with social emotional learning, what SEL means, and kind of getting some resources on SEL. I think if people look up in general just information on SEL and what that means can be helpful. I think it's a matter of what SEL does is they're like the soft skills in life, right? So it's kind of looking at what are the foundational things that young people need to have in place for them to be able to handle and take on those hard skills or those capacity building skills. And so being able to engage around conversations in that way, looking at resources online, I think are really helpful. And, you know, I wanna also talk about what young people are currently doing, right? So something that's very different in today's society than when I was a child or when we were children is that we didn't have cell phones, right? So our ability to engage with our peers was strictly either you were on a phone that the entire family shared, or you had to go outside, right? Like you were outside and you were engaging people on a one-on-one. Well, we can't expect that for young people because that's not their primary way of engagement. So, for instance, video games and social media. I can't really, I have a really hard time with video games and social media in terms of my way of communicating with people on a regular basis. However, video games, I've been kind of witnessing my son who just got out of school because he's not through the Department of Education. And he has been daily online with his peers. And it's the first time in months where I have heard him laughing. He's laughing, he's talking, they're problem solving. He's on a game. He's on a gaming system that is clearly a collaborative gaming system.
Right.
They're communicating clearly to one another. So these are the skills that we're hoping that they build out in the world, right?
Right.
He's communicating clearly with his peers. They're problem solving together in a group setting. He's dealing with conflict resolution. I'm hearing him like navigating arguments and like they're working it out.
Right.
He's also building his social skills and engaging with different kinds of young people, right? All of this is happening virtually. And you'd think that, oh my gosh, like my child's just playing a video game, but in fact, it has become so much more multifaceted in thinking about kind of how to engage. So even though it's informal, it's doing all of these really incredible things that he's not able to get during this time because he can't go outside and hang out with his friends in the streets, which is what I would want him to do if he had the opportunity, right? To Kim's point though, right, as parents, we also have to set clear boundaries and guidelines around like, okay, there's the informal and then there's the formal.
Right.
And so we as parents are really clear, as we've always been strict in terms of what flexibility we have. So for instance, there is varsity tutoring, right? There's a website
Great resource
that we've tapped into is varsity tutors that are providing free virtual summer camps. And they're adding summer camps every day. They're adding camps. So parents can go on. It's www.varsitytutors.com. And you can explore all of these different topics. It's broken down by age range. So you've got elementary school all the way through. And basically what I've told my children is, look, you got to balance it. We're gonna be flexible with you, and we're gonna give you time to hang out on tech and chat with your friends and sleep in and do whatever you want to do. But that's going to be balanced with picking and identifying virtual camps for yourself. You can pick the topics, you can pick the themes, but you're going to have to pick something, right? And we will support you in that effort. And so I think that's a way that parents can also kind of meet their children halfway, have conversations, figure out what they're passionate about. And if they're not passionate about anything, well, you could say, what we said was, you have a choice. You cannot be passionate about anything and select some things that you choose, or you cannot be passionate about anything and you're going to participate in the things that we choose. It's up to you, right? And so thinking about that, also thinking for parents, kids need to sleep. Everybody's tired. So, they need to sleep. And if that means they need to sleep in, let them sleep in. I would recommend highly that you do not schedule programming for your children. I've been telling this to our nonprofits that we work with who are designing programming. I've been telling them specifically, do not create programming that starts at 9 a.m. Create programming that starts at 11, that starts at noon, that starts at 1. They're not providing programming all day anyway as an organization. They don't have the staff, they don't have the resources, and young people are not going to be in a structured summer camp for 7 hours a day virtually. And so push your work for the afternoon, late morning afternoon, to give young people an opportunity to sleep in, get their rest, have some moments to just kind of be in the morning before you transition them into the virtual world. And so I would say, as parents, be as flexible as you can in meeting those needs. And especially if you're home, it gives you respite. The thought for me of my child sleeping for 3 hours extra is like a dream, I mean,
I know
seriously.
there was something else going on there, Marc.
No, it's perfect because I wake up at 11 o'clock. I wake up early. So from 6:37 until 11, I'm getting work done. I'm being productive. I can have my coffee, you know what I mean? And it's easy, right? Then 11 o'clock, okay, Mike, let's get up. Let's start your day. Let's get moving. Absolutely.
No, thank you. And Marc, thank you for breaking that, just breaking that down, because one choice is important, right? You always want your children to buy in to what it is that they're doing, but also you have to draw that line in terms of activities that they will do. So thank you for lifting up Varsity Tutors. That's an incredible resource. Also, I'm a big fan of Activity Hero. I've been all over that website. As a matter of fact, I think I signed my son up for the week-long, I think it's called Club Millionaire. And they're teaching young people about financial literacy and economic empowerment. So Marc has shared a little bit about what he has his children doing. So Kim, what have you been targeting?
So I was actually lucky enough. So Eagle offered us seats at Practice Makes Perfect. And so we were able to register for their summer program. And so Practice Makes Perfect offers 1.5 hours of live instruction plus 1 hour of independent work, but three times a week. And so they've offered, I think they targeted math, and math has to be Mike's strong point. And so this for him will be something that he likes to do. Right. And I'll be happy because he's doing math, right? And so he'll be engaged in that. We just got an email that he was accepted and he was able to he has a seat in that program.
Congratulations.
And that's going to be, thank you. That's going to be that's my requirement piece, right? Is you got to do this one piece. I am still looking for some other programs that will give him more time to do some fun things. Trying to engage him. He's not quite into robotics right? But he's more of a gamer, and he's super interested in kind of electronic devices. So thinking about those kind of activities as well, which I'm still looking for.
No, absolutely. Another great program would be All-Star Code for him to take a look
Right.
at. That's another great program. And there's just so many resources out there. Over the past oh my God, for the past month and a half, I've been in a rabbit hole on Google looking for
Yes.
programs. And, we're just in the process of kind of matching things up for our kids. And Mark, thank you for lifting that up. I'm going to actually keep that recorded. I'm going to play it back for my wife because our kids have been sleeping in. But honestly, we want them to make the most of their days, but having them move at their pace. And I think families have to realize that right now, the natural clock that our kids have had in terms of going to school is completely off, right? It's
Yes.
completely off. And so to be able to kind of give some grace, make sure that they're meaningfully engaged, and to kind of pull back a little. My son typically does not play video games at all during the week, right? That's something that's reserved for the weekend. But to your point,
Right.
Mark, in terms of how he's been able to create his friendship circle virtually, right? Utilizing Xbox Live, I should say, has been incredible. And that's his way of really reconnecting with his friends. So I've had to kind of pull back a little bit and really allow him to play in the evenings, which is never typically allowed, but we're not in typical time.
Right.
Exactly. And let's be clear, right? This is temporary. And so if our children, as much as I would love for my kids to get out every single day and be physically active and play their sports, which they were doing prior, right? As much as I would love that, they are young enough and they are agile enough that if they don't do that for a summer, it is not going to change the trajectory of their life. And we have to be able to understand that this is circumstances that are at play, and that what are the ways that we can incentivize, right? So for instance, I've incentivized my older son he loves Star Wars. And so he wants this lightsaber, and it's like a real lightsaber. And these lightsabers cost like ridiculous amounts of money. And they're like over $100. And and I've been very clear, my wife and I have been very clear that there is no way in a million years that we would ever buy him that lightsaber. However, if he wants to earn the lightsaber, he can earn the lightsaber. So we've put together this whole frame where he can work at different activities, and he can earn $1 an activity. And once he reaches his 108 or whatever dollars he wants, he can buy his lightsaber. And one of the things that we have is a 20-minute walk a day. That's part of the activities. So if he chooses to do a 20-minute walk a day, he gets $1. And so there are times when we force, every weekend we go out. We're now like trying to get out into nature and do something as a family just to get out into greenery and be socially distanced. So that's not an option. Like, you're coming, we're going on a walk. However, if during the week he wants to go out on a walk, there's some incentive and there's some other things. So I think that's also a thing. I think, Kim, you had mentioned it earlier before we were on live, is that when you start forcing your children to do things, it starts to, your child starts to not like what it is that they do, what they normally would have loved, right? And then it also creates a lot of tension between you and your children in a space where you're trying to alleviate tension because we're bound to each other 24/7. And so anything that we can do to, again, support their social emotional learning and really meet them where they are and be clear about our expectations, but also as parents, we got to let go. Like we have to, I am all about control. And in this time, I got to let go. I got to stop being controlling. And I have to really just allow my children to just live their lives, and knowing that this is a transition and this is temporary.
Right. And, Mark, and I think it's about creating great memories, right? You were just talking about, like, having that designated family time, like, taking that walk. I've actually started to do a lot more things with the family now. So we do the family game night. Just the other night, we had a karaoke concert. I actually bought a fake one of those WWE belts, and so we've been kind of passing around the Uno Championship. So I think as families, we also have to think about, well, how do we take full advantage of this unique situation? Like, we'll never have an opportunity like this to really spend this much time, like, with our loved ones. And for all of us on this Zoom right now, we spend more time with other people's children than we actually do with our children, right? So how to really make the best of those moments, I think, is also critically important. So thank you for lifting that up, Marc. Kim, is there anything that you would like to add before we close out?
Yes, I just wanted to just add a little bit more on what you were just saying. And so, like, we started out by deciding to watch the Marvel movies from beginning to end, right? And my daughter was gung ho. She's with it. Let's do it. Now I've seen them already, but like, let's get this, right? My son was like in and out, right? And I was like, what do you like? And so, but again, right, letting him find his space and his time when he was within and he was in and out. I think that we were fortunate in that just today, for example, his classroom science teacher assigned for them to watch Just Mercy and answer some questions about it. And so, of course, it's very timely, right? But it allowed us to have a different conversation, right? And so being able to engage him, and because usually I get really short, like one-word answers, right? He doesn't always talk as much. He's more of a thinker. Let's sit, come back to you later on what he really has to say. Right. And so this allowed us today to watch the movie, and the question that his teacher asked allowed us to have a different kind of conversation, and he engaged, right? And so I think that targeted activities, right? Like you were saying, Marc, like your son has like activities he can pick and choose from. I think that giving them the activity, 20 minutes, half an hour, right? And then letting them go is perfect, because again, it's not like this, I gotta do this thing with my mom again, right? So, but it's very much so that it's targeted, it's engaged. They understand that there will be an end to this particular time. We'll do something else again the next time. Right. And I feel like that's been super helpful. And one thing that I've been picking on is Wellness Wednesdays. The DOE has a site attached to Wellness Wednesdays, and not just the SEL piece, but just mental and physical well-being, how we're taking care of ourselves. And we have to acknowledge, for sure that we are all going through a variety of things, right? There's been loss, there's been sickness, there's been the civil unrest right now. There's so much that is going on, so much change that is happening, that we have to give ourselves and, more importantly, our children a space to kind of slow down and step back, but also to be sure that we're engaging and checking in, on a regular basis.
Oh, absolutely. Just yesterday, Nancy shared with us, one of my colleagues, Google Art and Culture. Are either one of you guys familiar with their website?
No.
Oh, listen, it's incredible. I actually spent 2 hours on it last night, and they have so many different features where you can actually review some of the museums online, but they actually have a link on Black history and culture, and they have a whole section on Black superheroes. As you can see, I'm a fan of, right?
Yes,
but you name the topic, it's there. So any students who are interested in art, culture, you want to kind of just take a deep dive, especially like, given the climate now, is critically important. And of course, one of my great go-to sites is Common Sense Media and Mommy Poppins, right? I'm a full-time subscriber to both of those, and they always have like up-to-the-minute information. So something great to really share with our families. But as we close out, any closing remarks? As we say hello to summer, thank you both so much. It's coming fast next week.
I would just say really briefly that one, when thinking about in person, I would highly encourage families to stay local. So stay in your neighborhood and try to identify things that are local. I would not recommend for families to put their children on public transit at this time. As much as our public transit system is opened, and as much as they say they're cleaning and cleansing, what I'm hearing both on the buses and on the trains is that it is very hard to socially distance, and you got to touch a lot of things.
Yes.
And the virus has not gone away,
No, it's not.
and there's a second wave coming, and so I'm not trying to put fear into parents, but I just want to
Be safe. Be
discourage sending your children on public transit to get to a camp in a different part of the city, which normally they would do at any time, right? So that's one thing. I think on a national basis, what's nice is with a virtual platform, you can go national. You can look for opportunities in camps outside of New York, and I would highly recommend it, especially with the West Coast starting 3 hours earlier. If they're providing morning programming, that is a perfect afternoon programming for young people on the East Coast. And we're seeing that actually happening. We're seeing organizations opening up their programming to a wider net.
Yes.
And so expand. So see what's happening in Chicago. Look and see what's happening in Dallas or in Seattle. Because there might be really interesting things that are not New York City based, which brings a different engagement of young people, and a different context that I think is really valuable. And then just one more thing, if you're thinking about protesting, which I think is an important thing to think about, there's protesting happening all throughout our city. And I think this is more for high school students. I would not recommend elementary and middle school parents sending children out to protest without parental engagement. But I think high school students are already engaged. They're driving a lot of these protests. And I think that is engagement that, to be quite frank, is probably some of the most powerful summer engagement that can happen, that builds on so many skills, right? If you're having a dialogue at home with your children about protesting and about what's happening, right? And you're encouraging it if they're interested, and talking about your fears as parents, talking about safety, being really clear about how do they participate in a responsible, mature way, and doing debriefs, checking in beforehand, doing debriefs afterwards. This is about civic engagement, cultivating leadership skills, building, contribution skills in society, feeling like they're playing a role in what's happening in their lives in a real way that's culturally contextualized.
Right.
There's no better way of learning than that, right? You're not practicing somewhere, you're really living and learning. And so if parents are comfortable with their older youth participating, I would definitely recommend doing some work and learning around that, because that's a way for young people to get out, get exercise, think about how they socially distance and be responsible with mask wearing, and building community in a different kind of way, I think is really helpful.
Yes, and the Citizens Committee for Children actually have some incredible resources around civic engagement. And Marc, you must have read my mind. I actually just enrolled my daughter into a art class. I think it's a modern art class in California at Otis because of the later start time. Absolutely, great suggestions. Kim?
I would add, as we think about the potential impacts, right? Not being in brick and mortar buildings may have on potential applications for next year or things like that, or going forward. Keeping in mind that, as human beings, we are all multifaceted, right? We have so many different layers and parts of ourselves that make us the unique person that we are. And use this time to allow our children to kind of figure those pieces out and to develop those pieces. They're not losing anything by taking the time to kind of figure out, I actually do like doing art. I actually do like listening to poetry, right? Let them figure those pieces of themselves out, and then they can hold on to that going forward. I think that the one thing to keep in mind is that what makes an applicant, whether it be to a middle school, a high school, a college, an employment program, a training program, what makes you a good applicant is being your whole self and bringing your whole self to that actual interview or that process, and allow that to shine through. And this is the perfect time to kind of start to figure out, more bits and pieces, more layers. What makes me me? And allowing our children the time to do that. And I'm also always a big fanatic, right? I love to read. And so my son, not so much. And so, I say, you want to read this comic book? Let's read this comic book. Let's do 20 minutes together, and then let's go from there. So keeping the reading going, and again, like in bits and pieces, not necessarily like as 45 minutes every single day, but then allowing them a space to kind of develop their interests and figure out where they lie and how they can then bring that to make them more part of their whole selves.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So listen, first and foremost, I would like to thank both of you for joining us today. I have the utmost respect for you guys professionally and just a genuine love, like, for everything that you do, who you are for your families and who you are for our communities. So thank you for really making this Hello Summer episode of the Virtue Village a special one, an informative one for our families. All right. Listen,
Thank you.
have an incredible, incredible summer. All right.
Yeah.
And let's make the most of it. And this is this
Yeah.
very, very challenging time. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much.